Weeks passed, and the house continued to transform, not physically, but emotionally. The oppressive atmosphere that once hung over every room had lifted entirely, replaced by a sense of calm and warmth that Maria hadn't dared to hope for. She still woke up some mornings half expecting to hear whispers or feel the chill of an unseen presence, but those days were behind them now. Instead, sunlight streamed through the repaired shutters, casting cheerful patterns on freshly cleaned floors. For the first time since moving in, Maria felt like they truly belonged. The kids thrived in their new environment. Lily spent hours playing in the yard, her laughter echoing through the neighborhood as she chased butterflies and made daisy chains. Noah, who had been so hesitant at first, now explored every corner of the house without fear, his stuffed dinosaur always tucked under one arm. Even the neighbors, who had initially kept their distance due to the house's grim reputation, began stopping by to chat or offer help. Slowly but surely, the Thompsons became part of the community. Maria threw herself into fixing up the house, determined to make it a place where happy memories could take root. With the little money she saved from odd jobs, she bought paint and tools, enlisting Lily and Noah as her eager assistants. Together, they patched walls, sanded wooden floors, and gave each room a fresh coat of color. The dining room, once dark and foreboding, became a bright space filled with mismatched chairs and a second-hand table where the family gathered for meals. Each brushstroke felt like erasing another layer of the past, replacing it with something new and hopeful. But Maria didn't stop there. Inspired by Emily's story, she started volunteering at a local shelter for women and children escaping abusive situations. It was her way of honoring the little girl who had suffered so much, a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness and courage could light the way forward. The work wasn't easy, but it gave Maria a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Her own struggles had taught her resilience, and she wanted to share that strength with others. One evening, as Maria sat on the porch watching the sunset, she reflected on how far they'd come. Just months ago, she had been desperate, unsure if she could provide for her children. Now, despite the challenges ahead, she felt confident in their ability to face whatever came next. The house, once a symbol of uncertainty, had become a sanctuary, a testament to their perseverance and love. Lily joined her on the steps, clutching a drawing she'd made earlier that day. "Look, Mommy," she said proudly, holding it up. It was a picture of their house, surrounded by flowers and smiling stick figures. In the corner stood a small figure in a white dress, waving goodbye. Maria smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," she said softly. "I think Emily would love it." As night fell, the stars twinkling above, Maria realized something profound. This house wasn't just a building. It was a living, breathing part of their journey. Its history, the good and the bad, had shaped them in ways she never expected. By confronting the past and choosing to move forward, they had turned what could have been a nightmare into a story of redemption. Life wasn't perfect, of course. Money was still tight, and there were plenty of repairs left to tackle. But Maria no longer feared the future. She knew that as long as they faced it together, as a family, they could overcome anything. And deep down, she believed Emily was watching over them, her spirit finally at peace, guiding them toward brighter days ahead. Maria knew she couldn't ignore Emily's presence any longer. The little girl's spirit seemed to be reaching out, not to scare them but to communicate, to share her story and seek justice for the pain she had endured. Determined to help, Maria began researching ways to bring closure to restless spirits. Her search led her to an unexpected ally, Mrs. Delaney, a retired schoolteacher who lived 2 streets over. Mrs. Delaney was known in the neighborhood as someone who took an interest in local history, often volunteering at the library or giving talks about the town's forgotten stories. When Maria knocked on her door, Mrs. Delaney greeted her warmly, though curiosity flickered in her eyes. "I heard you moved into the old Carter house," she said, ushering Maria inside. Over cups of tea, Maria explained everything. The hidden room, the letters, the photographs, and the strange occurrences that had become part of their daily lives. To her relief, Mrs. Delaney didn't dismiss her story. Instead, she listened intently, nodding occasionally as if piecing together fragments of a puzzle. "That poor child," Mrs. Delaney murmured when Maria finished speaking. "Emily deserved so much better." She went on to explain that while many people remembered the rumors surrounding the Carters, few knew the full extent of what happened. With Maria's discoveries and Mrs. Delaney's knowledge of historical records, they might finally uncover the truth. Together, they visited the town archives, sifting through dusty files and faded documents. What they found painted a grim picture. Emily's father had been abusive, both verbally and physically, and her mother, overwhelmed and complicit out of fear, had turned a blind eye. When Emily disappeared, investigators suspected foul play but lacked concrete evidence. The family fled soon after, leaving behind only whispers and unanswered questions. Armed with this information, Maria returned home, her heart heavy with sorrow. She realized that Emily's spirit remained because her story had never been told, not fully, not honestly. That night, Maria gathered her children in the hidden room, where it all began. She lit candles and placed them around the space, creating a soft, warm glow. Holding Lily's and Noah's hands, she spoke softly. "Emily, we know what happened to you. We're sorry no one helped you when you needed it most. You don't have to stay here anymore. It's okay to let go." As she spoke, the air seemed to shift. The oppressive weight that had lingered in the house for so long dissipated, replaced by a gentle stillness. A faint breeze rustled through the room, carrying with it the scent of lavender. For a brief moment, Maria thought she saw the outline of a small figure standing near the doorway, smiling before fading away completely. The next morning, the house felt different, lighter, brighter. The shadows that once loomed menacingly now seemed ordinary, and the creaks and groans of the old structure sounded almost comforting. Maria woke up feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced since moving in. Even the kids noticed the change. "The lady isn't sad anymore," Lily announced cheerfully during breakfast. Noah nodded, adding, "She likes us." Though Emily's presence was gone, Maria felt a deep connection to the little girl who had suffered so much. She decided to honor Emily's memory by sharing her story with others. With Mrs. Delaney's help, Maria organized a small gathering at the house, inviting neighbors and friends to hear about Emily's life and the injustices she faced. It wasn't just about laying a ghost to rest. It was about ensuring that Emily's voice would never be forgotten again. By the end of the event, Maria felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had given Emily the recognition and dignity she deserved, transforming the house from a place of sorrow into one of hope. Slowly but surely, the Thompsons were making it their own. A home built not just on bricks and mortar, but on compassion, resilience, and healing. The strange occurrences in the house grew bolder, more undeniable. Maria had always considered herself a practical person, someone who dismissed ghost stories as mere fiction. But now, living in this house, she found it impossible to ignore the evidence unfolding around her. Objects began moving on their own, small things at first, like a spoon sliding off the kitchen counter or a book falling from the shelf without explanation. Then came the cold spots, patches of icy air that seemed to linger in certain corners of the house, no matter how warm the day was outside. One evening, while tucking Noah into bed, Maria caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. As she turned off the light and closed the door behind her, she glanced down the hallway. And there it was. A shadowy figure darted across the far end of the corridor, vanishing before she could blink. Her heart pounded as she rushed toward the spot where the figure had disappeared, but the hallway was empty. The scent of lavender lingered faintly in the air, sweet yet haunting. It reminded her of the perfume described in one of the letters she'd found in the hidden room, the same fragrance Emily's mother used to wear. Maria wasn't the only one noticing these unexplained events. Lily started talking about the lady who visited her during the day when Maria was busy cleaning or cooking. According to Lily, the woman wore a white dress and often sat by the window, staring out silently. At first, Maria tried to rationalize it, telling herself that Lily's imagination was simply running wild. But then Lily added a detail that sent chills through Maria's body. She says her name is Emily. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Maria decided to spend an entire night sitting in the hidden room. Armed with candles, a notebook, and her flashlight, she settled into the cramped space, hoping for some kind of sign or closure. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Just as she began to think it was all in her head, the temperature dropped sharply. The flames of the candles flickered wildly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A soft sobbing sound filled the air, so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind. But Maria knew better. "Emily," she whispered hesitantly, her voice trembling. "If you're here, I want to help you." For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the sobbing stopped. In its place came a childlike giggle, echoing softly in the confined space. Maria's skin prickled as she felt a presence close by, though she saw nothing. She reached out instinctively, her hand brushing against something cold and intangible, like fingers slipping through hers. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized what, or who, it was. The next morning, Maria shared her experience with the kids. To her surprise, they weren't scared. Instead, they seemed comforted, almost as if they'd already accepted Emily as part of their lives. Lily smiled and said, "I told you she was nice, Mommy." Noah nodded solemnly, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "She likes us," he added. Though Maria couldn't explain it, she felt a shift in the atmosphere of the house. The oppressive weight that had hung over them since their arrival began to lift, replaced by a sense of calm she hadn't felt before. Still, she knew Emily's spirit wouldn't rest until the truth was fully acknowledged. Maria vowed to find a way to honor the little girl who had suffered so much within those walls, a way to give her peace and perhaps bring healing to her own family as well. Maria couldn't tear herself away from the hidden room. Each item she uncovered felt like another piece of a puzzle, slowly revealing a story that had been buried for decades. The more she read, the clearer it became. Emily Carter's life had been one of pain and neglect. Letters hinted at arguments between her parents, arguments about how to handle Emily, whose behavior was described as troublesome. Maria's heart ached as she imagined the little girl being locked away in this tiny, suffocating space, punished for reasons no child should ever endure. Determined to understand the full picture, Maria spent hours sifting through the boxes. She found newspaper clippings detailing the family's sudden departure from the house after Emily's disappearance. Rumors swirled in those articles. Some accused the father of foul play, while others suggested the mother might have been involved. No bodies were ever found, and the case went cold, leaving the town to speculate endlessly. But the letters painted a darker truth. Emily hadn't simply vanished. She had likely met a tragic end within these very walls. As Maria pieced together the timeline, a strange sensation began creeping over her. It started as a faint chill, then grew into an almost tangible weight pressing against her chest. She glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone, or something, watching her. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the dim light of her flashlight, and the air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. Still, she pressed on, unwilling to abandon the task until she understood everything. That night, sleep eluded her completely. Every time she closed her eyes, images of Emily filled her mind. A frightened little girl crying out for help, trapped in the darkness of the hidden room. Maria tossed and turned, haunted not just by what she discovered, but by the feeling that she wasn't alone. At one point, she woke with a start, certain she'd heard a child's voice whispering her name. When she sat up, heart racing, the room was silent except for the distant creak of floorboards above. The next day, unable to shake the growing unease, Maria decided to seek answers outside the house. She visited the local library, hoping to find records or news archives that could shed more light on the Carter family. An elderly librarian named Mr. Henderson recognized the name immediately. "Ah, yes," he said, adjusting his glasses, "the Carters. Tragic business, that was. Folks around here still talk about it sometimes." With his help, Maria dug deeper into the history of the house. What she learned sent shivers down her spine. Neighbors at the time claimed they often heard screams coming from the house late at night. One woman even reported seeing Emily standing at an upstairs window, her face pale and expressionless, before disappearing suddenly. After the family fled, the house sat empty for years, its reputation cemented as a place of sorrow and mystery. Back home, Maria tried to focus on practical matters. She cleaned, cooked, and kept the kids distracted with games and stories. But her mind kept drifting back to Emily. Who was she really? Why did her spirit seem so tied to this house? And why did Maria feel such a strong connection to her? One evening, as Maria tucked Noah into bed, he looked up at her with wide eyes. "Mommy, I saw a girl today," he whispered. Maria froze, her stomach tightening. "What girl?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "She was wearing a white dress." "No," replied softly. "She smiled at me and told me not to be scared." Maria's heart raced. She wanted to dismiss it as a child's imagination, but the description matched the photographs she'd found in the basement. Could it truly be Emily reaching out? Or was the stress of everything finally getting to them all? That night, Maria lay awake once again, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every detail: the letters, the photos, the whispers in the dark. She realized now that the house wasn't just a structure. It was a vessel carrying the weight of unresolved pain. If there was any hope of peace for herself and her family, she would need to confront the past head-on. Whatever secrets remained hidden in these walls, they weren't going to stay buried forever. The next morning, Maria decided to tackle the basement. It was the one part of the house she had avoided so far, partly because it felt too daunting and partly because something about it gave her an uneasy feeling. But with the kids occupied upstairs, Lily drawing pictures and Noah playing with his toy cars, she figured it was as good a time as any to face what lay beneath. Armed with a flashlight and a broom, Maria descended the rickety wooden stairs that groaned under her weight. The air grew colder with each step, carrying a damp, earthy smell that made her wrinkle her nose. The basement was cluttered with forgotten belongings left behind by previous owners. Rusted tools, stacks of mildewed magazines, and pieces of furniture covered in dusty sheets. Cobwebs clung to every surface like ghostly veils, and the beam of her flashlight revealed little more than shadows lurking in corners. As she began clearing away debris, Maria noticed something unusual: a faint crack running vertically along one of the walls. At first glance, it looked like ordinary damage caused by years of neglect. But when she ran her fingers over it, she realized it wasn't just a crack. It seemed deeper, almost deliberate. Curiosity got the better of her. Grabbing a crowbar she'd found earlier, she carefully pried at the plaster surrounding the crack. To her astonishment, the wall gave way, revealing a hidden door. Her heart raced as she pushed it open, revealing a narrow room beyond. Inside, the air was stagnant, thick with the scent of old wood and decay. The space was small but packed with items that looked untouched for decades. Dusty boxes stacked haphazardly, yellowed papers tied together with brittle string, and an antique trunk sitting prominently in the center of the room. Maria's hands trembled as she picked up one of the papers. It was a letter, its ink faded but still legible. As she read, her breath caught in her throat. The letter spoke of a family who once lived in the house, the Carters, and their tragic history. One name stood out: Emily Carter, a young girl who had disappeared without explanation nearly 70 years ago. According to the letter, whispers swirled around town about foul play within the household, though nothing was ever proven. Digging deeper, Maria uncovered photographs tucked inside some of the boxes. They showed a family frozen in time: a stern-looking man, a weary woman, and 2 children, a boy and a girl. The girl bore a striking resemblance to someone Maria couldn't quite place, her wide eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to leap off the page. In another box, she found more letters detailing arguments between the parents and references to the secret room, where Emily was allegedly locked away whenever she mispaved. A chill ran down Maria's spine as she pieced together the fragments of the story. This wasn't just a tragic disappearance. It was a tale of abuse and betrayal, buried deep within these walls. And now, standing in the very room where Emily had likely spent her final days, Maria couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. Who was this little girl? What had happened to her? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps above her head. She froze, gripping the flashlight tightly. The kids were supposed to be upstairs, but those steps sounded heavier, deliberate. For a moment, she debated calling out, but fear rooted her to the spot. Then, silence. The house settled back into its eerie stillness, leaving Maria alone with the ghosts of the past. She knew she should leave the basement, return to the safety of daylight and her children. But something compelled her to stay, to keep searching. There were answers here, waiting to be uncovered. Answers that might explain why the house felt alive, and why it seemed determined to make its presence known. The first night in the house was anything but peaceful. Maria had hoped that once everyone settled down, the eerie feeling would fade, replaced by the comforting rhythm of her children's breathing as they drifted off to sleep. But the old house had other plans. It began subtly, a faint creak here, a soft groan there. At first, Maria told herself it was normal. After all, houses like this one weren't built to last forever. They shifted and sighed with time. Still, the noises grew louder and more frequent as the hours dragged on. Around midnight, Lily startled awake with a scream that pierced through the silence. Maria bolted upright, her heart pounding, and rushed to her daughter's side. "What's wrong, baby?" she asked, smoothing Lily's tangled hair away from her face. Tears streamed down Lily's cheeks as she pointed toward the foot of her sleeping bag. There was someone standing there, she whispered hoarsely. A lady. She looked sad. Maria scanned the room, her pulse racing. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the moonlight filtering through the broken shutters. But there was no one there. She knelt beside Lily, pulling her close. "It's okay, sweetheart. It was probably just a dream." But even as she said the words, doubt lingered in her mind. The house felt alive somehow, its presence pressing down on them like an unseen weight. Noah stirred in his sleeping bag nearby, murmuring something incoherent before falling back asleep. Maria stayed with Lily for a while, holding her until her breathing steadied again. When she finally returned to her makeshift bed, she couldn't shake the image of a sad lady haunting the edges of her thoughts. Was it possible? Could the house really be haunted? She pushed the idea aside, reminding herself how tired and stressed she'd been lately. Her imagination was likely playing tricks on her. But the noises didn't stop. Over the next few hours, the house seemed determined to keep her awake. Footsteps echoed faintly above them, though Maria knew for certain both kids were still downstairs with her. Then came the whispers, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to float through the air without origin. Each sound sent chills crawling up her spine, yet every time she mustered the courage to investigate, she found nothing out of place. By morning, exhaustion clung to Maria like a second skin. The kids, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the strange occurrences that had kept their mother wide-eyed all night. Lily cheerfully announced her plan to explore the yard, while Noah busied himself building a fort out of empty boxes. Watching them play, Maria forced herself to focus on practical matters. They needed food, cleaning supplies, and tools to start fixing up the house. Ghosts or no ghosts, life had to go on. Still, the unease gnawed at her. That afternoon, as she swept dust and debris from the corners of the living room, she noticed something odd. A series of faint scratches etched into the wooden floorboards near the staircase. They looked deliberate, almost like symbols carved by hand. Maria crouched down to examine them closer, running her fingers over the grooves. Who would have done this? And why? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. It was a text from her best friend, Karen. Asterisk, how's the new place? Everything okay? Asterisk. Maria hesitated before replying. What could she say? That she hadn't slept a wink. That the house felt like it was watching her every move. Instead, she typed a simple response. Asterisk, it's fine. Needs work, but we'll get there. Asterisk. As she pressed send, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, making her jump. Outside, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, signaling an approaching storm. Maria glanced around the room, half expecting to see someone, or something, standing in the shadows. Nothing moved, but the oppressive feeling remained. Whatever secrets this house held, they weren't going to stay buried for long. The morning of the move felt surreal. Maria woke up before sunrise, her mind racing with a mix of excitement and dread. She packed the last of their belongings into cardboard boxes scavenged from the grocery store. Clothes, toys, mismatched dishes, and a few framed photos that reminded her of better days. The kids were unusually quiet, sensing the weight of the moment. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed bunny tightly, while Noah dragged his dinosaur along behind him like a loyal companion. When they finally arrived at the house, the sight was even more daunting in daylight. The overgrown yard looked wilder than Maria remembered, and the front steps sagged under their weight as they climbed toward the door. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and earth, and the silence around them felt almost unnatural. There were no birds chirping, no distant hum of traffic, just the creak of the old wooden door as Maria pushed it open. Inside, dust motes floated lazily in the dim light streaming through cracked windows. The walls were stained with age, and cobwebs hung like curtains in every corner. Despite its obvious disrepair, Maria tried to put on a brave face for the kids. "Look," she said cheerfully, pointing to the large living room. "We can put your beds right here, and maybe we'll find some space for a little play area." Lily's eyes lit up momentarily, but Noah stayed close to her side, gripping her hand tightly. "This place smells funny," Lily announced after a few minutes of wandering around. Maria chuckled nervously. "It just needs some fresh air, sweetie. We'll open all the windows and make it nice." But deep down, she couldn't ignore the heaviness in the atmosphere. It wasn't just the musty smell or the peeling wallpaper. It was something else, something harder to explain. Every step she took seemed to echo louder than it should, and shadows flickered oddly in the corners of her vision. Lily, ever curious, wandered off to explore further. "Mommy, there are so many rooms," she called out excitedly. Maria followed her voice, finding her daughter standing in what appeared to be an old dining room. A chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals dull with grime. "Can we eat here?" Lily asked, twirling in circles. Maria smiled softly. "Maybe someday when we fix it up." Noah, however, refused to leave Maria's side. He tugged at her sleeve, his small voice trembling. "I don't like it here, Mommy. Can we go back home?" Maria knelt down to his level, brushing his hair away from his forehead. "This asterisk is asterisk our home now, buddy. I promise it'll get better." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept into her mind. Was she making a terrible mistake? As the day wore on, Maria focused on unpacking what little they had, trying to create a semblance of normalcy. She set up sleeping bags in one of the larger rooms for the kids and made a makeshift bed for herself on the floor nearby. By nightfall, exhaustion had set in, but sleep didn't come easily. The unfamiliar creaks and groans of the old house kept her awake, each sound amplifying the unease she'd been trying to suppress all day. At one point, she heard soft footsteps overhead. Her heart skipped a beat. Could the kids be wandering around? She tiptoed upstairs, only to find both of them fast asleep in their sleeping bags. Confused, she stood still, listening intently. Silence greeted her now, leaving her wondering if she'd imagined the noise altogether. Shaking her head, she returned to her spot on the floor, telling herself it was just the house settling. Old houses always made strange sounds, didn't they? But as she lay there in the dark, staring at the water-stained ceiling, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Something, or someone, was watching them. Maria Thompson had always been a fighter. Life hadn't handed her much, but she'd learned early on how to make do with whatever scraps came her way. A single mother of two, she juggled odd jobs while raising her children. Lily, an energetic 8-year-old with a knack for asking endless questions, and Noah, a shy 5-year-old who loved his stuffed dinosaur more than anything else in the world. But lately, life felt like it was slipping through her fingers. It all started when Maria lost her job at the diner downtown. The pandemic had hit hard, forcing businesses to shut their doors permanently. Without steady income, bills piled up faster than she could pay them. Her landlord gave her one final warning: either come up with the rent or leave. Maria knew she couldn't stay where they were, not without money. So, she began scouring online listings late at night after tucking Lily and Noah into bed. She scrolled past apartments far beyond her budget and houses that looked like they might collapse if someone sneezed too loudly. Then, something caught her eye. An abandoned house. The price was shockingly low, so low that Maria almost dismissed it as a scam. But there it was, listed as for sale by the city due to unpaid taxes. No realtor involved, no hidden fees. Just a tiny amount of cash required up front. It wasn't in the best neighborhood. In fact, most people avoided driving through that part of town altogether, but desperation clouded logic. Maria told herself it would be temporary. They needed a roof over their heads, even if it was crumbling around the edges. Her friends thought she was crazy. "You don't know what's been going on in that place," one warned her. Others whispered about rumors they'd heard, that families who moved in never stayed long, that strange things happened inside those walls. Some said it was haunted. Maria brushed off their concerns. Ghosts weren't going to scare her away. Eviction notices already did a good enough job of that. When she drove by the house for the first time, her heart sank a little. The paint was peeling, weeds grew waist-high in the yard, and broken shutters hung crookedly from the windows. Still, she forced herself to see past the decay. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. If she fixed it up bit by bit, it could become a home again, for her and the kids. That evening, sitting at the kitchen table with Lily coloring beside her and Noah playing quietly on the floor, Maria made her decision. She called the number listed on the ad and arranged to meet someone from the city office the next morning. As she tucked the kids into bed later that night, she reassured them everything would be okay. "We're going to have our own house soon," she said brightly, though doubt gnawed at her insides. Would this really turn out to be the fresh start they needed? Or was she walking straight into another disaster? Little did Maria know, this decision would change their lives forever, not just because of the house itself, but because of what lay hidden within its crumbling walls.